Hello again, welcome to another video from the Tradelands Nation. This is our monthly world report. There were a lot of updates in November, so there's a lot to talk about today, and we will begin with a look at the economy. As of the closing bell on November 30th, the MNG 15 index closed at 22,658, up 143 points. This index represents the state of mining in the game and saw the beginning of a bullish market occur around November 16th. Which is coincidentally the same day that the Demeter was released back to the shipwright. And this shift is largely attributed to the enormous amounts of coal, iron, and copper needed to construct this limited time ship, all of which heavily influenced the performance of the MNG index. The JSI index ends at 17,790, down 2%. The Demeter did not have a high impact on timber felling, except in the case of oak, but a later change in the way that resource counts works has caused a dramatic fall in futures pricing, which led to the losses shown at the end of the month, making many players believe that this is going to lead to a collapse of the wood prices in December. And lastly, the earnings index closes at 47,168, down 1.5%. There was a slight correction that started on November 16th, which, again coincidentally, was the same time that the Demeter was put back on the shipwright. The earnings index saw its price improvement come from the sale of advanced engines, as well as from players selling surplus items to collect the doubloons necessary to build this ship. Unlike the MNG index, however, this was only effective at stopping the downward slide, lending to a modest increase of 300 points, enough to recover 1/3 of the losses accrued at the first half of the month. And yes, the Demeter was one of the hottest additions to the game in November. Many players have envied this ship since its initial introduction, and now many are taking up the call to build their own before it goes off sale again. To aid players in this, there was a 1.5 multiplier to the doubloons earned in November when you were doing cargo trading. Moreover, a significant portion of the market's activities in November can be traced back to the Demeter, such as selling crate weapons from the Halloween event to earn doubloons for building the ship, or even buying the necessary components and resources to direct purchases towards your Demeter, such as buying coal, copper, and iron off the market, which are all materials required in the construction of its engines, and all three of these are seeing a mid-month price correction as a result. When the Demeter was released, there was another change that came with it, presumably to help players make enough money to afford the Demeter, and that was the 1.5 increase to earnings through cargo trading. This has since been replaced, however, with a new method, one which appears to be permanent or at least semi-permanent, and that is a flat 10% increase to the cargo rates on low population servers and a 25% increase on high population servers. Our traders have tested this and can confirm it. It is accurate. One additional note is on the performance of the Albatross, which is believed to have received a nerf to its cargo trading capabilities, and while its sailing mechanics did actually get updated, which you can see at the shipwright, in actual tests on the Triangle trade route, which is the one that we expect the Albatross to be used on the most, we are still able to make the full loop in the same time as we did prior to the change, with no change to the optimal path required for the Albatross, meaning it is still one of the top trading ships in the game. But that leads us to the next big update to the game, and that is the addition of the Raider variants, and more importantly, the new slowing cannon shots. The Raider variants have undergone numerous changes in the last half of the month, so we prefer to save that update for the future until these are ironed out and we have a good understanding of where the Raider variants will end up in the long term. But the addition of the slowing shot is the next in a series of significant, albeit quiet, changes to the game's mechanics which have been going on all year. And with the addition of this new slowing shot that is applied to chaser cannons, this is likely to make for more interesting combat options and tactics for pirates and traders alike, and are likely to have an impact on the combat mechanics in this game going forward. And finally, one last big change was the decision to remove count limits from the high population servers. This is actually a big deal, especially for grinders. It was meant as a way to convince players to stay in high populated servers rather than continuing to move to smaller ones. This has had a big impact on the bond market. That is the one that we use to determine the volatility of the markets and determine how stable prices are. Generally, if all sellers are selling things at around the same price, it's considered stable. If they are varying, it's considered unstable. Some typically stable items such as oak and iron will see 3-digit volatility in the pricing this month as a result of this change in the slash count limits. Our read into this is that players are concerned that mining and timber felling are about to see significant drops in prices as a result of the change. And while yes, this is the likely outcome, especially for our 4 staple items, those are the ones that traditionally carry the highest demand by players, and those are oak, ebony, iron, and coal, can all be collected within the relative safety of your home island, which in turn makes them to be the most likely impacted by this change. But a cautionary look at how this has worked in the past shows us that the slash count restrictions have often been modified to support whichever way the developers want the market to move, in a similar way that the Fed in real life might change interest rates to get the market to move in one direction that they prefer as well. And with that, the final component of our economic section is a question. A question we are actually asked every time at this time of the year. When will winter come to Tradelands? Last year, we saw the effects of global warming cause a delay in the winter season, but the nations of the Grand Isles have been working very hard to expel the largest producers of greenhouse gases in the Grand Isles, namely Pershovia. And they were nearly successful at negating the impact of these greenhouse gases and bringing us all back to a carbon-neutral state. But with the reintroduction of the Demeter and its notoriously high carbon emissions may have negated that. So we will just have to wait and see when snow begins to fall in Tradelands and ice can once again be mined in the rocks throughout the game. And now it is time for us to segue into the politics, and we start with a new policy for mining onyx. Rumor has it that the Mafia, known as ABM, has issued a new mandate that onyx production would only be allowed to occur on high population servers going forward, presumably due to the loss that was occurring through smuggling on smaller servers. This in turn has irked a shadow group that uses onyx in their manufactories, with some claiming that it may be even used to construct those automaton ships that we have seen throughout Tradelands. But nevertheless, this group has hired the pirate faction known as TCP to resolve the situation. As a result, the pirates levied a strike force to occupy the island and convince the Mafia to change their ill-found policy. And when talking failed to resolve the situation, a landing of troops began. TCP's strategy was a straightforward one, expecting little to no actual resistance from the locals. They would land in the main port, split into 2 regiments, one securing the town and the other securing the heights to the south where the onyx is actually mined. But the resistance they found was staggering. Al Bruno himself is said to have led a detachment of a small strike force to aid the local militia. The fighting up the hills was fierce. After making some progress, a hero emerged amongst the locals. Nal. In what would later be described as one of the pivotal moments of this battle, he led a charge straight down the rocky cliffs surrounding the cove, single-handedly holding off an entire advance, allowing momentum to favor the defenders and pushing them back down towards the dock. But at this same moment, a regiment holding the town decided to make their own move. It wasn't just any regiment. This is one that is known to traders throughout the Grand Isles as the Black Cloak Regiment, for it is rumored that only the most elite of this pirate group are authorized to wear a black cloak on their uniform, one which must be earned through experience in combat alone. And now their reputation within this group, whether true or not, will be etched into yet another story underneath this name. For this 2nd Regiment, all wearing their black cloaks proudly over their shoulders and outflanked the defenders. At this point, all ABM could do was retreat, and for those who couldn't retreat, could only cower in the crevices in the rocks, hoping not to be noticed. And as the battle reached its inevitable conclusion, the illustrious leader of this group was seen vowing to make them pay for the deed that went down that day. But that is a story for another day, because while these corporate battles were taking place, another more sinister plot was brewing. Rumor has it that a rebellion was stirring in Nassau, and at first most did not take it seriously, partly because it is said that the whole thing was funded by a mysterious and unknown benefactor, one who may not even been a real person, and more importantly, may not have even been a citizen of Nassau when it started. But who was funding it, and to what end is still a mystery. Rumors that it originated from Nova were quickly debunked, and at this point Nassau declared that Whitecrest was actually being led by an evil king. Then a survey was conducted showing that King Zack actually had overwhelming support within his nation, and even the people of Nassau supported him. We even had the chance to ask a passing merchant if they also support King Zack, and it turns out that they hail from the small, distant kingdom of Clonmel, and sailed the incredible distance specifically to donate one of their naval ships to King Zack's cause, with their reason being that they have lived in a kingdom without a king, and it is a fate they don't wish upon anyone else. It seemed best to just let this small group of disgruntled players have out their issues while Tradelands marched on, but a swift occupation of several islands finally sounded the alarm, and ironically, it was when the rebels announced that they would land a small contingent on Fenwick that King Zack put his foot down and said, "Enough." Fenwick is an important island for its strategic value to Whitecrest. It is here that the infamous Retaliator is constructed. Moreover, it is believed to be the only place on the planet where it can be constructed. The trees on the West Island are unique to Fenwick and used in the construction of the sloop's spars, and the house to the east is said to be the workshop where the architect of the Retaliator lived. To allow a ragtag band of rebels access to this could spell disaster for all of Tradelands, and as a result, the white sails of Whitecrest's navy flew across the seas once more. And as a sailor of Nassau, likely pressed into service against your will by a captain who was paid off by one of the wealthiest in Tradelands, this must have been a daunting moment to look out over the bow of your ship and see the white sails of the Whitecrest Navy, the same navy that had been rebuilt with the latest in naval technology, that had taken on Pershovia, defeating the most powerful navy the world has ever seen, and now it is bearing down on you as their next target. And as they make their first maneuver, a show of expert and practiced precision, they make it known that this is no army of volunteers. It is, in fact, the most powerful and professional fighting force in existence in the game today. In the opening moments, Nassau attempted to outflank the Whitecrest long-range artillery, but it failed, leaving the Nassau fleet to simply pace back and forth like an animal trapped in a cage waiting for the inevitable. It was at this moment that the Whitecrest fleet, in a show of their fearsome power, lined up all of their ships with their bows pointing forward into a formation known as the White Tide, and then the members of the Church of the White Tide sang their war song. After watching their broadsides simply melt into the water, Nassau crews could do nothing but watch. And finally, they made a last-ditch charge into the White Tide, only to be picked off one by one. And in the end, only one Whitecrest ship would be sunk, King Zack's Pigeon. But it wasn't cannon fire that would sink it. Instead, it was the flood of thousands of Nassau citizens begging for mercy, which swamped his ship and caused it to capsize. This was an important moment for King Zack, for it was a reminder that many of these men and women are not actually his enemy. They are Whitecrest citizens under the occupation of an oppressor, and they need his help. King Zack then offered his proclamation to Nassau, letting the citizens know that he is coming to save them, and that those who do not raise arms against Whitecrest will be granted amnesty. Only those who actively fight will be crushed. A warning to all that stand in his way. Moreover, now realizing the urgency of the situation, he immediately split his force into two, one to liberate Freeport and the other to track down and crush the remnants fleeing to St. Christopher. The battle for Freeport was straightforward. Landing on the northern shores where his artillery could bombard enemy positions, his troops landed on the beaches and methodically made their way towards the rocky heights in the south. Despite a valiant effort to hold the line of houses, Nassau would eventually be flanked and crushed, with many of them outright surrendering and others using this opportunity to turn on their own leaders. The battle on the seas near St. Christopher was a bitter duel. The rebels did manage to offload most of their forces before the fleet could arrive. The undermanned Nassau ships made a desperate move to break out, heading towards their home base in Nassau, splitting off in two formations. However, the expert maneuvering of Whitecrest allowed them to engage both fleets simultaneously, ending Nassau's chance at escaping with at least part of their fleet. After a mad dash to outmaneuver each other, the forces of Nassau would be sunk, but not before claiming an important kill themselves, none other than the Whitecrest Retaliator, which was leading this fleet, forcing Whitecrest to stop to pick up survivors and delaying their return to Freeport. This would become important later, because at this moment, seeing that they were likely to be crushed within a week of starting this rebellion, the benefactor and his puppets made a desperate purchase, buying up second-hand pirate ships from dealers at Blackwind Cove, reportedly so desperate that they paid in full price and sent a newly created fleet into the rearguard of Whitecrest. And this gamble would pay off. Working in two separate strike groups, the Ironwood Hooks managed to separate the Alliance from the rest of this formation, allowing for their division of Kirans to overwhelm the smaller force and claim a victory. At the last minute, Whitecrest was able to capture one of the Nassau Kirin ships, but alas they could do nothing to stop the overwhelming firepower that Nassau brought upon it. And now, in what could have been a moment of triumph for Nassau, and could have stopped the momentum of King Zack, instead, these forces decided to be nearsighted, giving up their recently gained advantage and instead invading Freeport, where the battle-hardened elite Whitecrest Marines had just won a decisive victory a day ago and were still present. Moreover, they opted to attack from the southern shore and retake the same heights that had been their last stand the day prior. No surprise, Whitecrest was ready and waiting. While they did manage to get boots on the ground, they struggled to gain any momentum past the beaches. In a desperate gamble, they sent their warships around the sides of the island to envelop the defenders. While this would lessen the pressure on the beaches and allow them a short-term advance into the island, it came at great cost. For in the heat of battle, there are many who are good soldiers, others are great leaders, and for the lucky few, they become heroes. In what would later be the decisive finish for Nassau, the capture of the Hook, so conveniently parked in the Sound, by two Whitecrest commanders who hopped on the cannons and fired. Shortly thereafter, two more players would perform a surgical strike, commandeering two more ships and turning these cannons on the Nassau soldiers as well. The loss of their artillery meant that Nassau's invasion was finished, and with these brave Whitecrest soldiers capturing all of Nassau's ships, it meant that there was no escape for them either. The opportunity to turn the tide of the war was completely squandered. The battle would end as insignificantly as it began, with William, who had stepped behind a rock to take a phone call, stepping back out into the open, where there was now a horde of Whitecrest soldiers looking for him. taking him out before he could get refuge inside of the Blue House on the southern side of Freeport. And with this steamrolling of Nassau in November, we are left in the aftermath of all this. Was this rebellion for real? After all, it seems that the Grand Isles does in fact see King Zack as the rightful ruler of Nassau, and with the reveal of this Nassau war fleet, we know now who might have been funding this. Kateria. All of the ships seen in the opening attacks towards Fenwick appear to have hailed from this foreign country. What did they seek to gain from this? Was it to create a puppet state for their inevitable entrance into the region? Are they seeking to take St. Christopher in the way that Pershovia owned Clydesdale? Despite clearly funding this rebellion, at the last moment before the first battle, it was announced that Kateria had not been giving their state-of-the-art 17,000 hull point brigands, but instead the knock-off export versions with only 16,000 hull points. For a nation like Nassau that would pride itself on its trading capabilities, you would expect to see a fleet of converted merchantmen, and instead, with it being clear that they are receiving outside funding, the call to arms against the evil King Zack appears to fall on deaf ears. And yet, even armed with this information, the plot around this rebellion thickens. In the final battle, this image was captured. Is this the infamous Pirate Queen, masquerading as a Nassau rebel? Do the pirates support the rebellion, or perhaps is this just a pirate doing what pirates do best, collecting derelict equipment and loot to be resold on the black market? This is a question that may need an answer, but those answers may not come until next month, and if King Zack continues his momentum that he has started, he may very well have to answer these questions very soon. If it is indeed true that Kateria is behind this, will he stop to rebuild Nassau once the dust settles on this rebellion? Or is this the moment when the nations of the Grand Isles will rally together to show the world they are not to be trifled with and start an invasion of an aggressive outside nation? And with that, we will end this broadcast. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in-game.